You're watching Council Wrap-Up. I'm Susan Kennedy. We're here with the top stories of the Montgomery County Council for the month of December. Up first, December 3rd was a big day for the council as new officers were elected and a historic piece of legislation was signed into law.
Thank you very much.
The gavel has officially been passed as Council Vice President Sidney Katz will now take over as president of the council. He was nominated by Craig Rice and elected with a unanimous vote.
I care about people's hearts. And this man has a truly genuine heart. He has a kind soul, he cares about people, and it's indicative of all the ways in which he's served our community. And so, Madam President, I'm honored to nominate Sidney Katz as our next president.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Congratulations.
Well, I guess my biggest goal, and there's a lot of goals, but I guess my biggest is to make certain that economic development gets back on track in Montgomery County. And we have already started to work on it. The county executive and I have been doing a 4-business tour, and with that we'll continue as part of our process. But and I'm also very concerned about the debt in Montgomery County, and we are lowering it. We have, through government operations, and the council member Nancy Navarro from the GO committee has been working on that as well, but we need to get ourselves back on track, and we will.
And elected to the position of Vice President, Councilmember Tom Hucker.
Please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Congratulations.
A historic piece of legislation adopted by the council has been signed into law, the Racial Equity and Social Justice Act, to eliminate disparities that exist here.
A pattern of disparities, persistent disparities that to this day continue. And I began to really, truly then reflect on the notion that if these were a result of structural policies and a history that have perpetuated this idea of having to grab on to power, then we needed to come together and put forth legislation, not a policy, legislation that then would be an instrument to begin to dismantle all of these persistent disparities.
The council worked throughout the year to craft this new policy, which has several goals, including establishing an Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice. For Councilmember Nancy Navarro and Council President Sidney Katz, this measure is personal.
You know that of the 5 councilmanic district, 4 are majority of color. So in reality, this is who we are. And so whether this is a fiscal responsibility legislation, because if we don't know that our resources are being invested in ways that begin to address those disparities, then it is a fiscal responsibility issue, because then we're spending money without knowing if we're getting the return on investment or addressing the issues that we need. If we don't realize that this has a major impact in our economic viability, our economic development, this is an economic imperative issue, because the majority of those children going through Montgomery County Public Schools are of color, and they're not doing so well. So what about our workforce development? What about the health of our communities? That has an impact also on the bottom line. So for those people who keep trolling my Facebook, I say that as a taxpayer, you should really want to support this legislation.
Even though they did integrate in 1956, Montgomery County was not integrated in 1956. I can see people who are shaking their heads yes with me. I would go to school with friends. Gatesburg was a small town. Everybody knew everybody. I'd go to school with friends, but you couldn't go to the movies with them because it was not integrated. Montgomery County has come a long way in my lifetime, but we need to come a long way for a lot of other lifetimes.
The bill mandates racial equity training for all county employees and establishes an advisory committee with 7 county representatives and 8 public members. The bill also requires all proposed legislation have an impact statement on potential effect on minorities. The county estimates this program to ensure racial fairness will cost about $400,000 per year. Also this month, hundreds of this region's best and brightest turned out for the Committee for Montgomery's annual legislative breakfast. Leaders in government, education, nonprofit, and business came together for the annual Committee for Montgomery Legislative Breakfast with one common goal: ensuring a strong future for Montgomery County.
And good morning, everyone.
Newly elected Council President Sidney Katz told the audience of more than 800 that our success depends on the ability to work as one.
As I embark upon my year as President of the Council, I do so striving to be a positive leader. And I need participation from everyone in this room. We need to collaborate, communicate, and challenge the status quo to accomplish their shared goals for the residents of Montgomery County.
Katz said much of his focus as president will be to raise the county's image as a good place to do business. He and County Executive Mark Elrich have already begun that work through a series of meetings and charrettes designed for feedback and solutions.
As we work to increase our tax base, we must seize every opportunity to demonstrate that we are a great place to do business. We are taking the criticism we hear seriously and are committed to action. I will continue to work with businesses located here and those that should locate here so that we can expand and boost our economy.
Senator Chris Van Hollen was a guest of the event. He said though funding has been cut at the national level for some safety net services, a potential government shutdown appears to have been avoided, which is welcome news to thousands of county residents.
The good news is, despite the Trump administration's proposals to dramatically cut federal investments in Maryland and elsewhere, we've been able to push back on that on a bipartisan basis. So keep your fingers crossed if we can pass this budget in the coming days. It's actually very good news for Maryland. At the same time, the administration has undermined federal support for things like the Affordable Care Act, Planned Parenthood, and for food and nutrition programs. And so in those areas, the state is having to pick up some of the slack. Those are efforts done through executive orders, not by the administration, not through the budget per se.
I heard a lot of talk about education, which is incredibly promising to me. I heard about a renewed commitment to make sure that we're upholding the current commission recommendations and figuring out a way to make those actually happen. It really is truly important because we know when we're concerned about economic development, when we're concerned about crime, healthcare disparities, all those things, we know they're directly tied to education. I heard a lot of references about what that means when it comes to an investment in early childhood education as well. So it's very exciting to hear folks talking about this and to hear Senator Craig Zucker say this will be the year of the child.
It's way past time that the federal government step up and meet its obligations.
This gathering of leaders moves into the new year with the continued goal of keeping Montgomery County a great place to live, work, and learn. Friends and well-wishers stopped by the Rockville Library to pay tribute to Barbara Flack-Darko, who once served as an aide to former councilmember Tom Perez and who also published the first African-American newspaper in Montgomery County.
My name is Sidney Katz. You know, we really do appreciate everyone being here to honor the legacy and accomplishments of Barbara Flack-Darko.
Close to 20 years ago, Barbara Flack-Darko saw the need for an African-American newspaper to serve the residents of Montgomery County. So she became a one-woman publication when she founded the Montgomery Times, a paper that connected the county's growing black population. This week at the Rockville Library, Council President Sidney Katz hosted an event to honor the legacy of this trailblazer who died of cancer in February.
She was remarkable, and that's the first word that you use whenever you're discussing her. You use the word remarkable. And of course, she touched so many people's lives. She was a journalist. She worked for the Montgomery County Council. She worked for Councilmember Tom Perez. She certainly worked in various other campaigns. And she really brought to light to so many people about the history, and sometimes it was the lost history of people in not just in Montgomery County, but in far-reaching ways as well.
The first time I met Barbara, I knew this was the perfect person for the job.
Flack-Darko also served as an aide to former council member and current chair of the Democratic National Committee, Tom Perez.
You know, I was looking at some of the articles that were written in the Montgomery Times. And Barbara, as many of you know, was both the founder and the publisher and the chief bottle washer and, you know, everything in between. She was an activist, a historian, a journalist, a founder, a colleague, and a remarkably proud mother and a wonderful friend. And I had the privilege of getting to know her through Ike Leggett. After I was elected to the council, I was talking to Ike about how do I make sure I have a staff that reflects the remarkable diversity of Montgomery County, and he introduced me to Barbara, and that was an easy hire. And we had 4 wonderful years together. Tonight is a night to reflect on her legacy. She wasn't hesitant to write about things that were a little bit edgy.
Barbara provided us with an advocacy journalism.
The evening included remarks from some of Flack Darko's closest friends.
I met Barbara in the 90s when we, the Lincoln Park Historical Foundation, was celebrating the 100th anniversary of the historically black community in Lincoln Park. She was impressed with the work that we were doing in not just recognizing Lincoln Park community, but tracking the footprints of African American individuals, communities, churches, cemeteries, schools across the county.
But one of the things that was so important to me was that no matter what was going on, before she started the Times, Kwame and her husband were the center of her life. She said, in America or anywhere in the world, that you have your family unit is the most important thing you can have, but your children, and she had Kwame was her only child, was the one that she put her time into.
The Montgomery Times was published for 7 years.
You want to pop over to research?
And a digital archive of each issue can be found on the Montgomery County Public Library's website. The archive can be accessed through the articles portion of the website and from the African American History Resources page.
You know, in life, the ultimate outcome measure is leaving your community in a better place.
If you take one step,
and that's Barbara's legacy.
More than 30 speakers turned out for a public hearing on a measure that aims to raise funds for affordable housing and school construction, sponsored by Councilmember Evan Glass. Montgomery County Councilmember Evan Glass has come up with a proposal to bring in millions of dollars for low-income housing and school construction. He's crafted a bill that would tax teardowns, homes that are demolished and rebuilt to a larger scale on the same property.
The Housing Impact Fairness Act closes a teardown loophole. Had these fees been applied over the last decade to the nearly 2,000 homes that were torn down and rebuilt, the county would have received $100 million that would have gone to support our growing infrastructure needs.
Anything that we can do to add to our affordable housing stock, add money to the HIF, and certainly help with school construction to alleviate moratoriums and overcrowding in our schools.
Glass estimates that if approved, his bill could add as much as $5.7 million for school construction and more than $4 million for affordable housing programs on an annual basis.
When a studio apartment is built, an impact fee is assessed. The same for a one-bedroom apartment or a townhouse. But a newly rebuilt home is currently exempt. I don't think that's fair, and I don't think that's equitable, especially given the county's data showing that student generation rates for newly rebuilt homes is higher than student generation rates for individuals living in studios or one-bedroom apartments. Yet those small apartments pay fees that help our infrastructure, and the larger newly rebuilt homes do not.
More than 30 speakers turned out for the public hearing on the measure, where both sides of the issue was heard by council members.
I have serious concerns about the proposed bill. I disagree that this is correcting a loophole in the original legislation. The intent was always clear that replacing an older home with a newer one did not increase the impact on transportation or schools.
Given the critical lack of affordable homes in Montgomery County and the funding needed by schools to address the achievement gap, this is an important step towards greater equity and opportunity in our county.
Well, that does it for this edition of Council Wrap-Up. For more information on all of the work of the County Council, visit their website. I'm Susan Kennedy. Thanks for watching.